going into it, it was not like a conscious effort to, hey, let's make this as like gritty and visceral as possible. But I just wanted it to be like a real representation, of kind of that moment in time, because the early global war on terrorism, the early GWAT is kind of a vibe unto its own, and a
Yeah.
lot of a lot of the slang and everything, and that was something, with the Marines of that era, and I did a really job of like, and I didn't really keep notes and stuff on that first deployment, as far as like I didn't journal or no diary entries or anything like that, so I had to.
Which probably very few guys do.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Living out of a gun truck, for 100 days, like that's the last thing on your mind is writing down your feelings or whatever. But there were so many good kind of like jokes and one-liners and gallows humor and stuff that I have probably just forgotten. I tried to, when I got home, from that deployment, I really did make an effort to try to write down all the super the stuff that I thought was hilarious or compelling for other reasons. But yeah, because like my dad had mentioned, like way back when I first came in the Corps, he's like, not every day will be fun, but most days are funny if you approach it with the right, angle. So that really was something I was trying to capture. Like there was this like weird kind of slang that was used that the Marines kind of used, and that they were kind of like a mix between like mid 90s LA gangbangers and like a late 40s private detective. It was like this like bizarre, a lot of pop culture references that were like no shit, and some of them are kind of like hinted at in the book, but that's not because I'm trying to reference like a Tarantino movie or something. It's just because like that's what people actually said. That was like part of the lexicon of like how Marines talked back then. And I thought that was important to try to capture that, so hopefully that does kind of give it a realer and kind of grittier flavor.
Battle Line Podcast. Josh Bates is on with me for this episode. Longtime Marine Corps veteran and the author of his first novel, The Baghdad Shuffle. If you like gritty military novels, this is your episode. You're not going to want to go anywhere. Plenty of great stuff that we get into. Some combat stories, also just some life talk. And I thought it was a really good interview. I know that you guys are coming off of Memorial Day here. It's prior to Memorial Day as I'm recording this, so I will have hopefully seen the Memorial Day air show, and also went to a barbecue, which hopefully was good, since I'm speaking about something that happened, although it hasn't happened yet as the time of this recording, with a great friend of the show, Jason Lyons, and some of the guys from the team house. It'll be my first time at Jason's place now in Pennsylvania. And yeah, I hope you guys all enjoy your Memorial Day while, of course, remembering our fallen heroes, many of which we've spoken about on this podcast. And we always try to keep the memories of those guys alive here on Battle Line Podcast. Chris is not with me for this episode. As usual, when he's not here, he has a speaking engagement, but do not go anywhere. And you're going to love this. Josh Bates, let's get right into it.
From Kansas City to New York City, from planet Earth to extraterrestrial life in space, a podcast with no equal, engaged in unconventional warfare through your speakers and headphones. This is a show about embracing the suck, conquering your demons, and finding God in the face of adversity. Chris Tonto Peranto.
Switch is on. Motherfucker, I'm gonna shoot you in the face.
Ian Scotto.
Ian and I have been dating for a long time.
You are now tuned into the Battle Line Podcast.
The Switch is on, Battle Line Podcast. I am on with Josh Bates, the author of this book, The Baghdad Shuffle, which is his first novel. Most of the Battle Line audience tends to listen. We get way bigger listening numbers And then on video, sometimes we do well, sometimes we don't. If you're not watching video, though, you have one of the coolest setups in terms of the posters in the background. And I'm so used to guys coming on the show, and it's all military stuff, truthfully. So it's actually kind of a nice departure from that to see something different. Although you certainly have a lot you could talk about in terms of military accolades, which I'm sure we'll get into. But just to give a proper introduction, Josh Bates, Marine Corps combat veteran, served in the Marine Infantry and as a counterintelligence and human intelligence officer with deployments to Iraq, Afghanistan. Yeah, long decades of experience in the military, and now writing your first book. And I'm sure we're gonna get into a lot of things, but it's awesome to have you on, man. And I'm glad that actually it was the people from Double Dagger Publishing who hooked me up with you. And they tend to have a lot of Canadian authors. And I personally was like, I actually didn't even know you had US authors. And so it's great to finally be doing this.
Yeah, those guys are great. Phil and James and the whole crew up there. Yeah, really good people. They've been good to me. So
Absolutely, man. So, yeah, I don't know where to begin. There's plenty we could get into. I think before we even get into the book, before we get into your life in Hawaii and all that, I think just joining the military, man, your origin story, because I feel like anytime we have anyone on, there's always a different thing that inspired them to join and a different, just a different origin of what made them who they are today.
yeah, so I grew up in it. Pops was Marine. So from he was enlisted in Vietnam, machine gunner, was wounded 3 times, actually medically retired from the Marine Corps, and then about 7, 8 years later, after he'd gone to school, basically gave up his medical retirement to come back in as an officer. So then I was born, and yeah, so it's family business, and business has been pretty good past couple of decades. So yeah, so in high school, I was actually skateboarding down through downtown Honolulu. Came across where on Kapiolani Boulevard there, where the old Marine recruiter was. Went in, started talking to him. Got home, and my dad was like, "Damn it! Like, what did you sign? what are you getting into?" And I said, "Well, actually, I found out that and the recruiter, I still remember Sergeant Tomaselli. Still remember this guy. He was cool. He figured out that he's like, well, hey, if you have plans on maybe going to college, there's also this NROTC program that you can do with a scholarship,
Mhm.
right? And then so basically you get college paid for, and then you owe the Corps time on the back end. So looking back on it, with all the horror stories that most people have with recruiters, my guy was really cool. He pushed me over to the OSO pretty quickly, and then that's who handled the kind of the ROTC scholarship part of it. So I did that. Went to University of San Diego on our NRTC scholarship, and then straight in the Corps from there. So that was all I knew for 4 almost 5 years. Got out after my first hitch, actually, when we came back from Iraq. Did the corporate America thing for a little while I was still in the reserves. But things were still popping. So eventually just ended up coming back in. And I actually lap moved at that time. That's when I left the infantry. So as a reservist, that's when I ended up going to first look with the just kind of the general intelligence officer school, and then to CI human school after that. And then so when I put in my return to active duty package, they were basically like, hey man, you've already missed your company command window as an infantry guy. So if you have any hopes of getting promoted past captain, you might want to go ahead and make that lat move permanent. So I did, and then I just did CI human stuff almost purely after that. So and
So
then retired about
did
3
the
years ago.
combat deployments happen like later on?
Yeah, no. So the first one, I was infantry guy, and that's so like Jim, the protagonist in the book. Like a lot of that is based. A lot of that first act that takes place in Iraq. A lot of those episodes are kind of inspired by real life events that I kind of experienced
I
me and
kind
my
of
boys.
figured like Jim
So, yeah.
Wild, the protagnist, was a version of you.
Well, he's a much cooler version of me. He's much
Exactly.
saltier, definitely. Yeah. But yeah, so I mean, a lot of that was kind of based on personal experiences. But then when I came back from that deployment, that's actually when I got out of the Marine Corps, and then my subsequent deployment back to Iraq to Fallujah in 2006 was as an intel guy, and
Okay.
then to Afghanistan from 2012 to 2013. That was also as an intel guy as well.
Yeah, I
So
mean, it's an amazing career that you've had, and you don't put this in your biography. I just, when I was Googling you, it's pretty public and it's easy to find out, you also 20 years ago received a Bronze Star for a combat V with a combat V for valor in Iraq. I think that was pretty amazing to find out about, and that was, many years prior to you retiring. I would love to get into that story because, like I said, it's not something you put on the back of the book. It's not
Yeah.
a hey, look at me. But just Googling your name, I was like, this is an amazing story.
Yeah, well, I mean, honestly, I was just I was really lucky in the sense that I was first battalion, Seventh Marines. That was, my entire infantry time was with them, the first team, and the timing worked out to where we had done in 2002, we had done a unit deployment program to Okinawa, trained all over East Asia there, those guys. So by the time we came back, I was a first lieutenant, and moved over to weapons company. I was a combined arms anti-tank cat platoon commander during the invasion. But by the time, Operation Iraqi Freedom kicked off, when the invasion kicked off and we rolled out of Kuwait, that was, we were kind of the first string at that point. Or at least that's how I viewed all of our, senior NCOs, staff NCOs, our, all the platoon commanders, the company commanders, all the way on up the chain. It was a really, really tight unit. So I was extremely fortunate in that sense. And in fact, a lot of the, people kind of started asking like the other characters in the book, like who, one, they're all composites, right?
Hmm.
From different folks I've met along the way. But honestly, like I told them, I was like, a lot of the guys that I served with in 1-7 were so competent and so good at their job that they didn't necessarily make very compelling or believable characters. They'd be like, this is ridiculous. So in that sense, I kind of had to dirty them up a little bit, just to kind of for narrative purposes. But yeah, so it was that was a wild first couple of weeks during the invasion there on the push up to Baghdad. So it was a lot of times, being a cat guy, we were doing essentially motorized reconnaissance like well in front of the battalion. So not a lot of adult supervision, out there hooking and jabbing. So yeah, that's kind of the story of the deployment, and it was like I say, I got to do a lot of cool things as an intelligence guy later on. A lot of stuff, still can't talk about, but like really cool down. But to be honest, like from an adventure standpoint, or just like from a high drama standpoint, there was no better job than being a captain commander in the Marine Corps during the spring of 2003. On the push up to Baghdad. So.
Are you able to get into the actual story of what got you the combat, V for
Oh,
Valor? Because it's out there. I mean, if you Google it, but it'd be
yeah,
cool to
sure.
hear it
So
just
yeah,
like
I mean, yeah,
firsthand
there's
from
nothing
you.
nothing secret about it. It was actually kind of a composite of like several events. Probably the most I guess highest profile one was on day one of the war. Our objective was basically to secure the Azerbaijan gas oil separation platform, which is down in southern Iraq. It's just west of Basra. And there was a lot of concern, that like kind of previous from back in the Desert Storm days when they started torching the wells and everything. They didn't want this thing to be sabotaged and blow up because it caused all kinds of environmental damage and just a huge headache that we didn't need. So we raced in there and basically were able to take the GOSP, the gas oil separation platform, secured that pretty quick. But then beyond that there was kind of the outer perimeter of the 51st Mechanized Division, the Iraqi Army. They're straight Army guys, not Republican Guard or anything, but and they had all their old ass like Soviet era tanks set up there. And thank God they weren't really maneuvering, or really even firing the main gun. But what these guys were doing was they would jump up in the machine gun in the commander's cupola, fire off a bunch of rounds and then hop off of those and then run back to the next one, get up there, fire off a bunch of rounds, and kept, kind of trying to kind of leapfrog their way back towards the kind of the city center. And at first we had like our assaultmen had plenty of explosives and stuff, and they were able to just basically destroy the tanks as we moved along, with all the preset charges. But then we got kind of ambushed with some RPG and rifle fire in a slightly more like urbanized area. It was kind of on the outskirts of Azerbaijan proper, some apartment buildings and stuff there. And what I was worried about was there were some tanks that we were out of explosive at that point, and that we didn't, other than launching tow missiles in, heavily crowded streets, which we ended up having to do at one point. actually just ran up and dropped some frag grenades down the hatch of the tanks. So that was cause I didn't want if we left them in place and bypassed them, I was worried about those guys getting back up there and shooting at us, from the
Sure.
rear once we bypassed them. So that was kind of the main event, and I think partly because we had Martin Savage from CNN and his crew were kind of embedded with, so they filmed some of that, and I think because that some of that footage leaked out, that was kind of the impetus for like, oh, let's give this guy a bronze star. But
Did that
yeah, so
bother
that
you
was
to have journalists embedded with you guys? Because I know for
no,
some people,
actually those guys were really good. And the kind of the fictionalized version of them in the book, or obviously kind of do us a little more dirty. But that's so if they're listening out there, hey, apologies guys, again for some artistic license on that. We weren't happy about it, but at the same time, that particular crew was pretty good about staying out of the way and not jamming us up with much stuff. I did get in a little bit of trouble later on. We had weeks later on the outskirts of Baghdad. We had ambushed some guys, and there was some footage of that kind of made it look like it was a bad kill, if you will. And they were cool. Like CNN didn't, Martin Savage and his guys, they didn't release it. They had like their own edit, but that eventually leaked out in an edited form, not in a form that they edited, but someone else
yeah.
did, and it made it look not so good. So yeah, I had to go through some kind of preliminary inquiry. I had some questions to answer when I got home on that one, but fortunately, it did not go into full NCIS realm, and it was ruled a good shoot. So
It's one of those things that makes you feel like sometimes there really like shouldn't be cameras in war because you and I know how things work on the internet that anything that's shocking, anything that's horrible, that's what's going to go viral. It's not the stuff of people doing the right thing and
right.
heroic actions. Like I just think about, I remember when I was in college, there was that viral video of some military member throwing a puppy off. I don't remember
Right,
even
right.
what it was.
Yeah,
You remember
yeah.
that? That was huge. And then there was also the like pissing on well terrorists with Marines. That was huge. I had a guy on the show actually who did a whole film. Miles Lugosi, not one of my favorite interviews because he didn't seem like he wanted to be on the show, but he did that whole film, Combat is Obscura, and is a guy who really doesn't like his time in the military and like put out a video or movie, a documentary of like some of the worst things that he saw fellow military members doing. And yeah, that's kind of unfortunately what people want to see. They want to see the stuff that's shocking and that could paint the military as a whole in a very bad light and see, and this is what the military does and
Yeah.
portray it really negatively.
Yeah, it can be. It's all context, and when I kind of transitioned to become a novelist, I wrestled with that as well, right? Because um, the whole like if it bleeds, it leads. Like that, there's a lot of like in crafting a compelling narrative. There's a lot of that as well, right? So like I highlight a lot of the bad shit that goes down
Oh yeah.
for dramatic effect, right? So that's it would be maybe a little bit hypocritical of me to say like, yeah, the press should never do that or show that stuff when, again, I'm trying to sell a book that's based on a lot of that same action. So I get it, yeah, but like I say, it's context and nuance and presentation is everything. So I think people being able to control kind of the edit that goes out, that's a big thing to make sure the ones that were actually there that can have a broader appreciation of everything that led to that specific action. That's a big deal. So yeah, like I say in the book, I kind of portrayed the CNN crew that is in the book. Again, a little dirtier than the guys in real life. Like I said, they actually did right by us, I think, in for that deployment.
Yeah. Well, I think whether it's movies or it's books, there is a definitely a certain segment that wants to see that raw, real stuff, which is what this book is. I'm trying to think of the movie that just came out. I saw the trailer. I haven't watched it yet. Is it, do you know what I'm talking about?
Warfare,
Yes.
Warfare,
And
yeah,
like
yeah,
I
great
sent,
flick.
I'd actually love to have one of those guys on the show. I tried to. I haven't heard anything back, but like, yeah, I sent Chris, who's usually on the show with me. He's out doing a speaking engagement, but Army Ranger, Benghazi attack survivor. This audience knows him, but yeah, he was like, that trailer was a little bit hard to watch because you could tell that's the real raw shit from guys who have actually been there. And yeah, I do think there definitely is an audience who doesn't want to see the watered down hero worship movies, and you could tell that's not what that is, and
Right.
that's not what your book is.
Yeah, certainly not. I mean, that wasn't the going into it. It was not like a conscious effort to, hey, let's make this as like gritty and visceral as possible. But I just wanted it to be like a real representation, of kind of that moment in time, because the early global war on terrorism, the early GWAT is kind of a vibe unto its own, and
Yeah.
a lot of a lot of the slang and everything, and that was something, with the Marines of that era. And I did a really shitty job of like, and I didn't really keep notes and stuff on that first deployment, as far as like I didn't journal or no diary entries or anything like that. So I had to.
Which probably very few guys do.
Yeah, exactly. Living out of a gun truck, for 100 days, like that's the last thing on your mind is writing down your feelings or whatever. But there were so many good kind of like jokes and one-liners and gallows humor and stuff that I have probably just forgotten. I tried to, when I got home, from that deployment, I really did make an effort to try to write down all the super the stuff that I thought was hilarious or compelling for other reasons. But because like my dad had mentioned, like way back when I first came in the Corps, he's like, not every day will be fun, but most days are funny if you approach it with the right, angle. So that really was something I was trying to capture. Like there was this like weird kind of slang that was used that the Marines kind of used, that they were kind of like a mix between like mid 90s LA gangbangers and like a late 40s private detective. It was like this like bizarre, a lot of pop culture references that were like no shit, and some of them are kind of like hinted at in the book, but that's not because I'm trying to reference like a Tarantino movie or something. It's just because like that's what people actually said. That was like part of the lexicon of like how Marines talked back then. And I thought that was important to try to capture that. So hopefully that does, kind of give it a realer and kind of grittier flavor.
I am sure that you are enjoying this episode with Josh Bates. Really great episode. Great dude. First time speaking with him, but I loved all the interesting stuff that we got into. Before we continue, I am interrupting just to tell you that I absolutely love Bubs Naturals. And although you've seen me drink all different types of stuff during the show, I just got back from a workout before we did this interview, and I got started a little bit late, truthfully, and I just had to get some water and some Bubs Naturals and put it in this blender bottle, which, by the way, is a steel blender bottle because I'm trying to get away from the microplastics. I bet you Sean Lake is on that kick because, yeah, I'm learning all about this drop in testosterone and finding like teaspoons and tablespoons full of microplastics in everyone's brains now because everything we're drinking and eating is out of plastic. It is a mess. That's a whole nother podcast. However, yeah, in this blender bottle, I've got my Bubs Naturals collagen post-workout and some water. I would say it tastes delicious, but it really tastes like nothing. You're just mixing up water and collagen or whatever beverage that you want to put in with collagen, and you're getting all of those great benefits for your hair, your skin, your nails, muscle recovery. And yeah, if you're looking for something to ingest post-workout that's not going to fill you up but is going to do your body good, that's where their grass-fed, single-sourced collagen comes in. And it's one of the best dietary supplements because you're not getting collagen in your diet. So it's something that you need to be taking. It is the fountain of youth. So get the best collagen out there from Bubs Naturals. And it's also getting warmer out there. Not really warm today, but it's getting warmer typically. So if you're out there like me and you're going for your morning runs and you're doing your cardio and you're sweating and you need to replenish after all of that hard work, you get in and you have yourself a hydrate or die. My favorite flavor is the lemon. Best hydration packets on the market. So check it all out and support the Glenn Doherty Memorial Foundation in the process, helping veteran families. You're going to get 20% off your first order just because they love us so much. BubsNaturals.com. Use the promo code BattleLine for 20% off your first order. BubsNaturals.com. Promo code BattleLine. This show is also sponsored by, say it with me, Fort Scott Munitions. If you are a listener of this show or a viewer, wherever you're watching, viewing, which we appreciate, you've heard me talk about Fort Scott Munitions many, many, many times. It's the best ammo out there. FSM is a manufacturer of multi-federal patented solid copper and brass CNC spun ammunition that is designed to tumble upon impact in soft tissue, leaving devastating wound channels for faster bleed out and quicker incapacitation. This ammunition was originally developed to innovate and improve on the standard of military-grade ammunition design. It was found that not only did the TUI ammunition outperform competitors in the self-defense industry, but it quickly became apparent that it would be a top contender for hunters alike. With the ammunition being CNC spun, the tolerances are some of the tightest on the market, ensuring that you receive the same results with every pull of the trigger. Fort Scott Munitions is available throughout privately owned businesses in all 50 states, but because, once again, they love us so much, they give the best deal to you when you go to FSM.com and you use the promo code BATTLELINE. That's going to get you 15% off your order of most of the stuff on the site. So FSM.com, use the promo code BATTLELINE. You'll get 15% off, only available to listeners of the BattleLine podcast. So keep that secret. Fort Scott Munitions is a proud supporter of Chris Peranto, BattleLine Tactical, and the BattleLine podcast. FSM.com, promo code BattleLine. Let's get right back to my interview with Josh Bates. So did you have it in the back of your mind as you were going on these deployments that maybe I will write a book someday about this? Because when you say like maybe I should have kept a journal the first time, did that idea just come about at a certain point that like I have so much good stuff I could write this?
Yeah, not until I got back from the first deployment. And that was when I kind of really, I'd always been like a pretty big reader of, military and spy fiction and crime novels and stuff like that. My mom really pushed me to read a lot when I was younger. So like I was always had like paperbacks and especially, in the Marine Corps, is a lot of hurry up and wait. So, you're waiting on a helo or waiting on a truck or something like that. You got time, like what the hell else are you going to do? Sitting on your pack. So I always had like books with me. I'd even, I'd even hump them to the field, like for whatever the extra ounces or whatever, like it was worth it a lot of times, like during training, just to have kind of a little bit of that escape. So I was always really into it. I had just never really, I had never really read a lot of books by authors that were like under maybe 40 years old that I thought were worth a damn. There were a few, but I thought, that at that point in my life, like I just need to live more first, right? And then maybe focus on it later on. And then I came back in the Marine Corps and just got busy and with the gig and just, didn't get around to it. But then once I retired, then it was like, well, maybe I should revisit that. And I'm glad I did, because actually, this book, like I said, I have been kind of percolating on that story for a long time. And so once I actually sat down and started banging it out, it started writing itself pretty quick, So I think from the day I first sat behind the laptop until I had the first draft that I started, submitting to publishers was probably only about like 90 days, which is pretty fast, for,
Yeah. Oh yeah.
For 85,000 word novel or whatever. But that was, yeah, but the subsequent ones will definitely take longer. But because I had at that point, about 20 years to like kind of, chew on that story a little bit, like, okay, how can I bring it back to the States? Like, how can I maybe incorporate some other locales there and really kind of focus on the crime and the revenge aspect of it, so that it doesn't become kind of a boilerplate, military thriller. That was kind of the approach there for that one.
I'm sure you've seen it. There's just more and more military members writing memoirs and writing novels. And
Yeah.
truthfully, I can't have them all on. It's too many to keep up with. Like I get so many emails to our inbox of, you got to get this guy on. And if unless we did the show every single day, there'd be no way to get all these people on. And it's funny because I've been doing this, like not this particular show, but this whole thing now for trying to think. I mean, well over a decade now. And I worked with Brandon Webb and Navy SEAL. He was one of the original guys. I mean, I know, of course, there was way back. You had Carlos Hathcock and you had Dick Marcinko who wrote their novels. But like of the GWAT veterans, he was one of the first. And then you had Chris Kyle, then colleague of the show, Nick Irving, Army Rangers. And, then a guy like Jack Carr blew up with doing thrillers, who was a Navy SEAL. Uh,
Yeah.
Did you read some of those and say, like, fuck, I think I could do this, man?
Yeah, some of them. So like Jack Carr's books, I didn't read Terminal List until I was late to the game on that one. I didn't read that until after I'd already written the first couple drafts of my novel, which I was like, wow, there are some kind of structural similarities there, but overall, I think yeah, I obviously love that stuff. I dig it. I hope that more veterans do write and continue to kind of tell the story, whether it's in memoir form or particularly I'm one of those guys that think, fiction can really be a vehicle to kind of get the point across, maybe even a little better in certain respects. And plus I just dig stories, right? So like that's part of it as well. But yeah, no, I think it's great. Like the barrier to entry on a lot of that stuff is lower nowadays because of technology, social
Yes.
media, other ways to kind of promote the hustle, if you will. So I think that's good. I hope people are not discouraged that, hey, maybe there's like a oversaturation of these things like in the marketplace or whatever, and not go after it. So yeah, if you got a story to tell, tell it.
Yeah, I always encourage guys who are thinking about doing something like this to just do it, because I think a lot of people are waiting around for like a publisher to approach them.
Right.
And unless, truthfully, like Chris, who does the show with me, when he got back from Benghazi, he was a part of a monumental event and people
Right.
wanted his story. That's not most people, and it's not most veterans. Most of them are going to have to take the initiative and write the story and pitch it. And even if no publisher wants to pick it up, you could self-publish. There are so many avenues now where you could get out the book on your own. I know, even these books that became huge, like David Goggins, he self-published because I remember him saying on Rogan, oh, no one wants to hear a book about some black guy who was a Navy SEAL. And he was like, well, my audience isn't just like black guys. And he's like, if anything, it's more like white dudes reading my books. And he was right. The book turned out to be a massive success. So, yeah, I think people need to just take the initiative and not wait for like the opportunity to come to them.
Yeah, absolutely. Just get engaged, right? So like that's the way I was turned on to Double Dagger was I was reading James Stiskel, who was a former Army SF guy and CIA like ground branch dude. He wrote a series of excellent novels, but he had just switched from his old publisher to Double Dagger, and I read Dead Hand, which was the first. I think that was the first one he published with Double Dagger. So then I was like, oh, that's cool. I wonder who published this, and I looked at it and kind of got on the website and like, oh, they're soliciting like non-represented manuscripts, so like I don't need an agent or anything, and was able to kind of just cold call them and move from there. So I think that all that stuff is definitely out there. If you're waiting for some big name author to like find you out of the sea of social media stuff and be like, oh, I think this guy, maybe I'll take him. I'm sure that does happen from time to time, just networking, but there's plenty of vectors where you can be kind of in control of pushing your story out there and making those connections, without a lot of overhead. Like I said, like I don't have an agent,
Yeah.
was able to get it published, so
Yeah,
it
the
can be
big
done.
thing is, I think, to just make sure you're going with someone who is legit, like Double Dagger, because I've seen far too many veterans, truthfully, get kind of duped by these really, um, nefarious publishers. I saw one guy that I worked with at one point who was working with and I'm going to put in air fingers quote, Christian publisher. And I think that someone from them got arrested at one point because, like, yeah, they were taking all this money and we're going to publish your book and really not seeing anything in return. There were two guys we had on the show who wrote a book who I'm not going to say their name, because I don't want to make it look bad for them because they did nothing wrong. But yeah, their publisher was just, you got to spend all this money to get your book out there and we're going to keep the rights to your book and all this stuff. And like, that's not the way it's supposed to work, man. And
Yeah.
you feel bad because I know for you guys, it's like, a lot of these guys, they'll say we're door kickers. We're not like, seasoned authors and businessmen. We don't know how this is supposed to go. And there's a lot of people out there who are like willing to make a buck by really fucking some people over.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, yeah, that for sure that exists. Like I say, I was lucky that I had some people who were kind of peripherally associated with the publishing industry to at least say, like, kind of from a legal or procedural standpoint, yeah, these guys maybe not so much, but maybe kind of focus over on them. But like I said, with Double Dagger, that was just because I happened to be reading a book I like and
Yeah.
saw who published it, and then okay, like let's reach out. And I think that's probably the biggest piece of advice for anybody that may have the background and can draw from a deep well of personal stories to make some really compelling fiction, but they're worried that, like, from a kind of a process or from a mechanical or artistry standpoint, that they're not a good enough writer to do it. Just read more. That's how you become a good writer, is by reading books. And there's what yeah, that I think that's a lot of people's stories are a lot more compelling than they're willing to give them credit for, I think. And writing is a process, right? So yeah, of course your first couple of drafts are going to suck, and you got to just grind through and push on. And if you are someone who generally loves stories and storytelling, then I think that's probably the lowest obstacle that you're going to have to overcome moving forward.
Yeah.
So that's just a really long-winded way of saying, yeah, like,
No,
if you got a story to tell, I'm all for it. Like I said, the marketplace can absorb a lot more. It's not a zero-sum game. It's not because some other vendor's writing a book, like, that's going to cut into, like, my profits on Baghdad Shuffle or whatever. So yeah.
People want to hear it because I think there are a number of guys who have a story in them but haven't put it out there yet. So with this book, the Baghdad Shuffle, one thing I will say, so for one, it's written like in a journal form, date, time, and place of where you are or where the protagonist is. And one thing is that the minute you open up this book, you go, okay, this is as raw and real as it gets, because I just mentioned a bunch of military thriller authors. And although there may be a lot of violence in their book, I think that because they understandably want to appeal to a mainstream audience, they want their book to be the type of thing you could pick up at the airport on your way to boarding a flight. The language is toned down a little bit. That is not this book. This book is going to be as gritty and as raw as you could think of, and that's going to appeal to a certain segment of people. Some people maybe not so much, but yeah, I think the audience should know, if that's what you're into, that's this book.
Yeah, I tried not to hide that. It's certainly not for everybody. Like, it's genre fiction, right? So a lot of the, like, hard-boiled crime stuff that I grew up on, he absolutely huge James Ellroy fan. Like, he's probably, as a writer, probably my number one influence. That shit can be pretty unpalatable for a lot of folks. Right? Like, it's just like it's a different world, and I think it's great in the sense that it's very immersive, and you can, especially when it's kind of written first person POV like that. Yeah, it can really draw you into some worlds that you may never experience otherwise. But yeah, it's the language can be rough. A lot of the depictions of violence and whatnot can be, and like I say, it does come off as kind of callous, or like I'm killing people off casually in the book, and it's like, well, it's because it's set during combat, right, in wartime, and that's essentially how it's presented in real life. So I personally, I think that style works, but like, yeah, it's definitely not for everyone. There is a much more selected target demographic for who's going to dig that kind of stuff. But maybe other people wouldn't think they will, once they get into it. So yeah,
everyone's going to have something that appeals to them more, or just that appeals to them specifically. Because I was mentioning, with like some of the Christian military authors, like we've had Andrews and Wilson on a number of times, like, yeah, they're openly Christian. The language is going to be toned down compared to this. For some people, that's what they want to hear. For some people, they're like, I want it as raw as it gets, and I want F-bombs flying.
Yeah. And and also, like I say, because going back to the whole, like, every day is not fun, but most of it's funny. Like, it's not written as a comedy, but I did want to capture, like, just some of the shit that comes out of Marine's mouth is, it's comedic gold. Like, there's no way that, like, as a screenwriter or a novelist or something, that, like, you would ever be able to actually come up with that stuff that was, said in the moment. And I actually had to go back and cut a lot of that stuff out because I was like, I might need to use this like in the sequel. I don't want to like, I don't want to, use up all the, I don't want to go Winchester on comedy ammo. Um, but I think that's a huge, that's an angle that I think resonates with a lot of veterans as well. And just people who are into kind of like genre fiction, as a rule, is the kind of the gallows humor. I think that carries over pretty well. Whether it's it's a military story, a spy story, a crime story, whatever kind of narrative device you're using. Um, that's always good seasoning to have on there, right?
Yeah. So is that the goal for the Jim Wilde character to be a series, and that every year we're gonna get a Jim Wilde novel?
Yeah, that's the goal. And so my contract with Double Dagger was just for the first book, so we'll see how it does sales wise. But yeah, hopefully, as long as I'm not losing them money and they still dig it, we can move forward. So I've actually already started working on a prequel that is kind of focused on Jim Wilde's stepfather, who was Vietnam era Marine. Um, and then also, yeah, there. I mean, the book ends on a Baghdad Shuffle ends on a pretty deliberate cliffhanger. So the sequel part of that is in the works as well. At least from like a storyboarding standpoint. I haven't actually started writing it yet, but yeah, that's the goal. Is to carry that one out through at least 3 books.
You would release the prequel and then the sequel?
Well, I don't know. Is that kind of like, I've wondered about that from a marketing standpoint. Like, if you've got them hooked with the cliffhanger, do you go ahead and deliver the sequel right away, or do you maybe like throw the prequel in there first and say, hey, like, well, okay, I guess I'll buy this one in the interim while I'm waiting for the sequel to come. I don't know. I'm not a marketing guy. I had a lot of like really definitive ideas for the prequel that I wanted to get down on paper first. But yeah, I'm game. I'm game to do the sequel or prequel, whatever. Give the people what they want.
Yeah, you just got to make sure it's not confusing to the audience when they pick it up. But when you say that it might be loosely based around you, and then you told me that you come from a military family, that makes sense.
Right. Yeah. So I had to like, yeah. I mean, there's definitely some personal connections that are drawing on there. But like I said, the Jim Wilde character is obviously like a much cooler guy than I was at that age. Much saltier, much more seasoned. Getting jammed up by FBI and NCIS, and playing the tough guy with them. Like, I would have been shaking in my boots that have been badged by the feds for like a potential criminal act or something, thinking I was going to jail.
Yeah, we had Brad Taylor on pretty recently, and the thing that he said, and he's another guy who's been there and done it, and then wrote
Mm-hmm.
books because he is a former Delta Force operator, and he said, "Look, everything in my books is based on things that I actually saw, or this is the way it would be done." But he said the big difference is in my books, it's like action, like not all this crazy stuff is going to happen at once. And he said, like, if the books you wanted to be totally realistic, it's going to be waiting around for, chapters. And then he's like, and then the end of the book would be like mission denied. So that's what he said on the show. So he's like, yeah,
Yeah.
if you want it to be realistic, it's going to be a pretty boring book. He's like,
Yeah.
the lingo's right, the tactics are right, but no deployment is this action packed.
Absolutely. And that's what, like I say, so like the first act of Baghdad Shuffle that takes place in Iraq before it moves back to Los Angeles. That is all those, 85 to 90% of that stuff is based on real life incidents, but obviously dramatized. And then obviously the timeline had to be kind of compressed and monkeyed with, right, to make it so that, yeah, you're not, waiting days and hours and days of boredom in between that stuff, because it's just not compelling to read. And I, on the Intel side too, I've had those discussions with a lot of folks from the Intel world that are, getting into spy fiction. And it's like, it's the same thing, right? Like, nobody wants to read about a dude writing contact reports for 7 hours, like after a meet, right? It's just not, there's just no way to like, well, I mean, maybe there's a way, maybe someone will crack the code on that one, but at least all the spy author masters of yesteryear, I've never really seen that done well. They find other ways to kind of push the plot forward without having to get into that. So yeah, I think that's an absolutely like a very like that's a very astute observation that like, yeah, that balance between reality and action. And it's usually when it comes down, it's chronological, right? It's the compressed timeline of all that kind of stuff. Um, and that's fine. I think most readers understand that, whether
Sure.
they're veterans
I
or not.
Yeah, I realized I sort of butchered what he said now that I'm thinking back. He said it would be 10 chapters of PowerPoint and then the end would be mission denied. That's what
Absolutely.
he said. But yeah, that's like the better way of putting it. But so outside of the book, I know that you're in Hawaii right now, which is like this is the beauty of, technology, the fact that I'm here in New York, you're in Hawaii, and actually no connection issues, knock on wood, or anything like that. But that's where you grew up?
Yeah, mostly. So I was actually born in Oceanside, California, right outside Camp Pendleton.
Oh wow.
I was stationed there. But then, yeah, most of my formative years were here. So elementary school, a little bit of middle school. We left, went back to Virginia for a little while for first 2 years of high school. Then I came back here, finished up high school here in Hawaii. And then it took me, about 14 years, 15 years in the Marine Corps before I was finally able to get orders back here.
Hmm.
And I was able to, I always joke that my proudest professional accomplishment was I was able to do my like last 7 years on active duty, like on Oahu. Right. So no small feat, given my military specialty and my rank at the time, but made it happen. And my wife is retired Navy, and that
Oh
helped
nice.
too, right? She got orders here first. So we were able to kind of do the dual military spouse thing and make that work. And then once she retired, I only had a couple years left before I was eligible, so was able to do that. But yeah, it doesn't suck, man. It's not a bad place to retire.
Yeah, I've never been there. People may be wondering because even for someone like me, I've traveled all over the U.S. I've never been to Hawaii. It's like a different country to many people. What was it like growing up out there?
It was great. It was great. I surf, I spearfish, like all those things.
Nice.
I take advantage of living in the ocean, and I yeah, it's a different gig than anywhere on the mainland for sure. But I think in a good way. I mean, obviously, I wouldn't live here if I if I didn't.
Sure.
So it's yeah, no, it's been great. So yeah, there's it's a good place.
That's awesome.
Generally,
And
a good community, like good. I actually know my neighbors here, like
sure.
which I never did, like in California or whatever. So it's a good sense of community. Just good people.
Yeah, it's awesome. And then you also said, because I was commenting on the background and all that before we hit the record button, and it's cool to see all the Elvis stuff. And then I saw some of the other posters, and you let me know, and the Hank Williams, but which isn't as totally visible. That's behind you. But yeah, if actually people want to see what I'm talking about, if you move over, yeah, that's the Hank Williams
Oh,
Grand
there
Ole
we go.
Opry. And which is really cool because anyone who knows Hank Williams knows that he was banned from the Grand Ole Opry. So that's really cool to see. Yeah, and you got just a ton of stuff. But you told me that the flyer in between the Elvis and the Hank Williams is of your band, as well as the other one next to it, right? The white one next to it.
Actually, way over on the other side. There's a couple of them up there, but yeah.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
the one to the left of Elvis there, that's
I
yeah,
just saw the one on the other side of Elvis, right? Because it had the same name on
oh
it.
yeah. That's one too. I didn't know you could see that one in the
Yeah, so
you find it
yeah,
there,
and I
yeah.
see a little bit of the guitar. So yeah, you were telling me you had a band and you occasionally still do stuff. So that would be really
Yeah,
cool to hear about.
the Napalm Readers. So and it's Napalm underscore readers on Instagram for those of you who may be interested. But if you dig like 60s inspired garage rock, or basically any of the bands that the Cramps covered during their career, that's kind of our thing, right? So yeah, it's really fun. My cousin Alex is the drummer. He lives in St. Louis, and then my buddy Reed, who's been in the music industry for years, he's in Tennessee, and he plays bass. So we don't get together that often, but we still gig a few times a year, and it's fun.
So you guys reunite with everyone all over the country once a year. Do you, like there in Hawaii usually, or just
Yeah, we
somewhere
played. So yeah,
different?
that flyer is from I think the last time we played here, last gig we had here in Hawaii. Yeah, so they'll fly out. We'll rehearse for a day, the day before, sometimes the day of, and jump into it. But Yeah, it's funny. We always joke it's all, all our songs are E, A, and B anyway, so it's it's easy to figure out.
It's cool that you keep those connections though, because a lot of people, so it's funny. I've contemplated moving to Florida many times because I love the warmer climate. And there's been three times, one very recently where I was like, I'm gonna fucking do this, we're going, and I bailed out at the last minute. And I think it's just the sense of community. Like I've lived here on Long Island or very close for so
Mhm.
long, and I still have like some of the same friends from elementary school. My parents are here. I'm an only child, that type of thing. So I have some friends who have moved away who I'll still see pretty often. They'll still come back quarterly or something or a couple times a year. And then I have other friends, actually, who's like a friend of mine who's an Army veteran who never comes back to visit. And you feel like
Right.
you're out of the loop. So I think that is really important that, like, if you have a band, that's still important to you, regardless of if you're ever going to make it big or anything, that you guys come together and are able to gig once or twice a year.
Yeah, absolutely. Like so Reed, my buddy in Tennessee that's playing bass, and this one, like he and I have been playing in bands since we grew up here in Hawaii together, went to high school together, been playing in bands for 35 years now or whatever. So yeah, it's just it's what we do for love of rock and roll. So and it gives a good excuse too, to like actually sometimes go out and stay at a club past like midnight from a guy
Yeah.
that's in my late 40s. Like that's a could be a big ask sometimes. But yeah, thankfully, my wife's cool with it. She puts up with us making a racket down here downstairs when we're rehearsing. So it's all good.
Yet, and I see what appears to, I can't see totally either be a guitar or a bass over there. So I assume you're either the guitarist or the bassist.
Yeah. So well, in this band, in the Napalm Readers, I play guitar and sing. So yeah,
Is
but
that
yeah,
a
there's
guitar or a
bass down.
bass?
There's a bass. That's a bass. This one's a bass. That's the
That's what
old
I was like, I think that's a bass.
beautiful garage dance.
Nice. Nice.
Fun. Um,
And then, yeah, I see a guitar on the other side.
yeah. So that's been kind of we're into trashy guitars and
That's cool,
basses.
man.
Yeah, it's fun.
So you play in other bands around Hawaii outside of that, or?
I do have like a kind of a more traditional rockabilly duo thing they've been doing with my buddy Jeff, who's long time. He's phenomenal guitarist. So we've done that. We just kind of got that one off the ground. He just moved back out here, so we're trying to get that one going as well. But yeah, we've starting to gig around a little bit. It's been fun.
It's cool. As I said when we started the interview, it's like a change of pace seeing your background because I think a lot of military guys, and there's nothing wrong with this, but a lot of military guys I think are like, that's what defines them, man. And you look at the backdrop and it's, stuff that you actually have earned, honors that you've received. And a lot of times that's what's in the background for them. And I think for you, although I don't know you well, obviously the first time I'm ever speaking with you, but it seems like you're a little bit more multifaceted where that may not be what you lead with, that you were a Marine.
Yeah, well, I obviously love the Marine Corps. I love my time in it. I love hanging out with Marines. In fact, we even still have like a first Friday drinking club that we call it now that
Nice.
I'm officially old and retired. Like I can hang with those guys because they're all like super old core guys. Um, so I certainly maintain that community for sure. And obviously living here on Oahu, it's a great place to do it because there's a lot of retired Marines, a lot of retired, servicemen, service members in general. But yeah, we've got other interests. I was playing in garage rock bands before I was ever a Marine. So that was kind of one of the first loves. So
Yes,
yeah,
it seems like writing, guitar, and the core. Those are three big components of who you are.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And then and like I say, growing up here, yeah, I've surfed my whole life pretty much. So that's another big piece of it. That's kind of a whole
Nice.
other community, of guys that I get out in the water with quite a bit. But yeah, it's good. Like I say, that's one of the great things about living here is the ability for like kind of all those different worlds to combine, right?
Absolutely. I gotta get out there at some point. My friend Will
Good
lives in
man,
Hawaii.
do it.
Well, actually, he doesn't live in Hawaii now. I have that wrong. He lived in Hawaii. He is now in Mexico. But
Okay.
I mean, I've heard great things. The only thing that I always hear that's not great is they're like, it costs a fortune to live out there, and probably even
Yeah, it's
more so
pricey.
than
It
in
is.
California.
Yeah, oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. So like I say, my wife and I, we don't have kids, so we're kind of doing the dual retiree pension thing, dual income, no kids thing. So that helps. But
Sure.
yeah, it can be prohibitive cost wise. We were fortunate that we got in the housing market, a long time ago before things really got out of control. So that was just the benefit of being our age, I guess. Um, but yeah, if nothing else, just come visit, man. It's a great place.
Yeah, I'd love to. And it just seems like more of a chill vibe. I always hear from people that when they come back from there, they just feel a lot more relaxed and at ease. And it's less of this fight or flight mentality living every day.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, because I'll be the first to admit, like the East Coast hustle, that's a real thing, right?
Oh,
Like out
yeah.
there
Oh, yeah.
grinding on, yeah. And and it's funny when I've had friends that have like moved out here in different industries to work that are from New York or anywhere on the Eastern Seaboard, really, some of the Mid Atlantic states, and yeah, they just hit the ground just like hard, right? I mean, they're out there just grinding every day, and then eventually, sometimes it takes maybe years, maybe even a decade, and then you finally start to see it like seeps out of them. But yeah, no, it's all good. It is definitely a slower pace of life for sure. Uh, Generally speaking, at least like definitely in our neighborhood, like it's an older vibe, right? A lot of folks like when they get out of high school or whatever, they go to the mainland to make money and kind of get their career situated or whatever, and then eventually move back here. Um, so it's not as big, maybe like a youth culture scene as you would see like in like Southern California or Texas or New York or whatever. But yeah, I love it. So I don't want to
Yeah,
live
the
anywhere else.
interesting thing is things are changing so much in that everything is global now, and there's so many people working remotely now. And yeah, I do a few different things, but this is one component of what I do. And I have another YouTube channel, and all of that stuff. I write for all this stuff behind me, right? I do, narrative.fm where I do In the Wild, Ian Scott of Rocks, my other YouTube channel. But like, it's mainly all stuff that I could do from anywhere. I could
Right.
live in Indonesia and do this if I wanted to, which is actually where one of my video editors is. But like, yeah, things have changed very much where most people, yes, they do commute every day to a 9 to 5, but things have changed that if you could find out what your strong suits are and a way to make a living doing it, you could kind of escape that matrix per se.
Yeah, for sure. That's that's a real, like I said, just like we were talking about with kind of the barrier to entry being lowered for getting into fiction, right? And I think a lot across a lot of industries, like a lot of those opportunities are out there. But making those moves it can be not comfortable at first, right? That's tough breaking yourself out of the kind of out of that shell. That's one thing I think, obviously 20 plus years in the Marine Corps, when you are constantly moving and deploying, like it helps kind of like you've seen that movie before, right? So it's like
Yeah.
there's not as much apprehension about like, oh, what's next, what's on the other side, because you've gone through those paces. So, but having said that, now I've lived in this house for like 10 years now, which is like the longest, by 3 or 4 times the longest I've ever lived
Wow.
in one place. There, not having to change my address on Amazon deliveries and all that. So, it's just like
Yeah, it's a pain in the
just
ass.
being able to stay in one place and kind of cultivate like that community. Like I say, we're actually like know our neighbors, and all the guys play softball with or surf with or go fish with, whatever. Like that, it's nice. It's a nice change of pace from the hectic, like always on planes, trains, and automobiles lifestyle of being an active duty Marine.
So would you say that's your, forever home now, as they say?
Yeah, I mean, maybe definitely. I don't plan on leaving Hawaii anytime soon. Never say never, right? Like you get to a
Sure.
certain age, it things may happen, but yeah, unfortunately, like my folks live about a mile and a half from us here. They retired out here too, so it's a good setup. Yeah,
That's a big thing. That's
it is.
I think just because I'm about to be 39, and you do think to yourself, okay, I need to make the most of this time with my parents here.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And I'm like, I think you said you're only child. I am too.
Yeah.
So it's,
Yeah, that's a big
yeah,
thing.
for me. Yeah. Yeah.
I want to make sure I can say every now and again I can get on the bike with my dad, and it's actually like he doesn't typically do that unless I come over, and yeah, I got to motivate him a little bit to be more active, and yeah, I feel like if I'm not here, I don't know, I would miss out on a lot, and I think maybe they would miss out on a lot too.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And it's a gift. That proximity in that time is a gift for sure.
Yeah. So you gave me the Instagram for Napalm readers when I was
Yeah.
doing background research. I didn't really see you on anything. Are you on any social media
I
that you
am.
want me to
So
follow?
for all the, yeah, it's I'm on Instagram and Facebook, just Josh Bates, but Instagram it's
But there's a
hard.
million Josh Bates.
Yeah,
So
exactly. It'll pop up. So on Instagram it's going to be hardboiled_alive.
okay.
Yeah. And I do like book reviews and stuff on there as well. So for a lot of like the crime and military fiction stuff that I dig, yeah, I try to highlight those, especially some of like the lesser known ones, or kind of maybe like older ones that have kind of vanished from the public consciousness in recent years.
Okay,
So
so
so yeah, if you dig
Instagram
that kind of
at
stuff, that might be.
gotcha.
Yeah, so
So
it's hardboiled_alive.
okay,
On
perfect. I'll make
Instagram.
sure
Yeah.
that's in the notes and everything. Man, this has been awesome. I think we covered a lot of different ground. I guess last thing would just be what do you want people to get out of this who are thinking of picking up the book? What's your appeal to people who are thinking, all right, I listened to this, maybe I'll pick it up? Like, what do you want people to get out of it who are contemplating reading the Baghdad Shuffle? Because there's plenty of books to read right now.
Right.
Every week, people are like, "Oh, there's another book I have to read." So yeah,
Exactly. Well, yeah. Number one, first and foremost, I just want them to be entertained, right? Like,
sure.
I think it's a cool story. I think people will dig it if they get into it. But beyond that, yeah. So entertainment number one. But beyond that, like, it will take, I think, a few people out of their comfort zone, right? Because it's profane. Like, there's a lot of, like I said, there's a lot of casual death. There's a lot of like dark humor. There's a lot of other stuff that maybe isn't discussed in the most polite society, but it's not like I'm trying to make something purposely like amoral, or there's no like weird political angle to it or anything. It's just that it's at heart a revenge story, which I think a lot of people can that resonates with most everybody, has had those emotions in the past, and to some degree it's unapologetically so, right? Which I think is another thing. There's in a lot of like modern fiction, whether it be film, TV, books, there are kind of like those kind of peripheral motives to try to like push certain messages or whatever, and that's not the intent behind this at all. Like I say, it's just to really immerse people from that kind of point of view of like, this is how I remember this going down, so here's the dramatized sexier version of that, and kind of draw your own conclusions.
Absolutely. One last thing I have to ask. I know I said that was the last thing, but I just thought of this, and I did write it down in my notes. We have Memorial Day coming up. It will be the day after Memorial Day by the time people hear this, but they're getting, they're getting back to work and all that after Memorial Day. I mean, your guy has a long military career. I assume, just based on the book, seen plenty of men that you served with pass away honorably. Yeah, what does this day mean to you?
It's always a heavy time, right? Because when I look back on how fortunate, so like on that first deployment, the one that Baghdad Shuffle is roughly based on, um, I didn't lose any Marines in my platoon, right? And we had some folks get wounded and whatnot, but nothing. I didn't lose any, right? So I wasn't that guy writing the letter home for that one. And then I came home, and then ES got out of the Marine Corps for a little while, was a civilian. My battalion went back in '04, and two guys that I was fairly close with were killed like right at the beginning of that deployment, right? And so there was a little bit of that, like, you start you start going down the what if of like, well, obviously, realistically, had I been there or not, it wouldn't have mattered, right? Like that kind of stuff that shit doesn't play, but that doesn't keep you from like thinking that, right?
Sure.
So that's always been kind of a huge catalyst behind like, or my approach, kind of how Memorial Day feels, or how I deal with it. But at the same time, like I said, I've been fortunate and have put in the effort to really stay engaged with a lot of my veteran buddies, a lot of the crew that were that kind of served as inspiration for the composite characters in the book. Like I still talk to those guys all the time, right? So we have that kind of support network to, so when things do get heavy, like I say, there's always ways to lighten it up with humor, with reminiscing about the glory days when we were young infantry studs and could do no wrong. So I'm lucky that I still have that, and I obviously encourage anybody out there, other veterans specifically, that if they don't, it doesn't just magically happen. You got to put in the effort. You got to reach out, talk to people, respond to text, respond to emails. Be willing to talk to people on the phone. You can't just sue yourself off and think that that's going to magically somehow happen. But if you put in the effort, it helps. It helps.
Absolutely. Well, I know you don't say happy Memorial Day, of course, but I hope you enjoy your Memorial Day. I know for me, I always have a great time going to the Memorial Day Air Show. Last year, it did not happen at Jones Beach due to the weather. So hopefully, by the time you're hearing this Tuesday, I was at that. I'll also be hanging out with a friend of the show, Jason Lyons, another Marine colleague of yours, and some of the guys from the Team House podcast. We'll be having a barbecue at Jason's house. So yeah, man, but this was great. I think people are going to get a lot out of it. I think a lot of people are going to want to pick up this book. So please do, because yeah, if you do, and this is successful, then we'll hopefully see a prequel and a sequel in some certain order. And yeah, man, I really appreciate you coming on. And thanks to the guys from Double Dagger for pitching you to me, because I enjoyed this.
Yeah, certainly. I appreciate it, Ian. Yeah, it's been great talking to you. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely, man. And if the prequel or sequel comes out at some point, we'll do this again, hopefully with Chris. I'm sorry, yeah, every now and again he's just got these speaking engagements, and
yeah, it happens, man. That's the gig.
Yeah.
That's all for this episode of Battle Line Podcast. But we're always posting new content on social media. Follow us on Instagram at Battleline Podcast and on Twitter at Battleline Pod. That's an order. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any new episodes up every Tuesday. Leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or your podcast platform of choice. Believe in yourself. Face all challenges head on. And as always, never quit.